Welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Justin Allen Rose, and for this episode, we have a very interesting interview. This interview is one that I had with Annie Laurie Gaylor, who is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, also known as the FFRF. Now, the FFRF is currently party to a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the nation's first religious public charter school right here in Oklahoma. The nonprofit group has been quite active in the Sooner State in other ways as well. They recently got a Tulsa Public School to remove Christian displays from several of their classrooms, and another public school district in the state to stop hosting daily prayers during its morning announcements. During our conversation, we talked about those cases and much more. While this conversation does host ideas which typically are not in the majority within Southwest Oklahoma, that reality makes this conversation an even more important one to have. Without further ado, this is For the Record. So, Annie, thank you for joining me for this episode of the podcast, and you're with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, correct?
That's right. I'm
As
a co-founder.
a co-founder of this organization. And so I'm assuming a lot of people that view this podcast are going to listen to it. If they have heard of your organization, it was only maybe a 30-second snippet of a news story they might have seen on television and whatnot, so they didn't get a full picture of what your organization does or what it truly is. And so to start, can you give us a quick spiel over what the Freedom for Religion Foundation is and what do you guys do?
We have two purposes. The first is to protect our secular constitution and its requirement that we keep religion out of government. We have a godless secular constitution whose only references to religion are exclusionary, such as that there can be no religious test for public office, that doesn't talk about divinity, that puts sovereignty in we the people, and that also has the First Amendment, which says that the government cannot establish a religion, and it also can protect freedom of religion. And our claim is that there's no true freedom of religion if you do not have freedom from religion in government. And our second purpose is to educate the public about the views of us who are personally free from religion. So we started off with two of us, my mother. I'm hearing sound feedback.
You're hearing some, let me shut off my mic and just see if that would help.
Yeah, I don't know if that gets picked up by you.
That is very true. Let me, Are you getting feedback with your voice?
Well, let me try. I was getting feedback, but I'm not getting it right now. It started just at the end of sentences. No, I'm not hearing it now. Is that okay?
Yep, 100%. You keep on going.
Okay. So my mother was the principal founder as an early abortion rights activist. And I was a college student when we started FFRF as a local group. And then she was asked to take it national in 1978. And when she was working for abortion and contraceptive rights here in the state of Wisconsin, and I was following her around as a high school student, we could very clearly see who the organized opposition to reproductive rights was, and it was religion. It was busting parochial school students, nuns and priests, people standing up saying the Bible condemns abortion, which it does not, but always making religious arguments. And we could see how important it was to keep religion out of any laws affecting reproductive rights. It could have been some other issue. It could have been creationism versus evolution or gay rights or something like that. But for us, what opened our eyes to the real necessity of keeping religion out of government was to see this war against reproductive rights. And now, if my mother died in 2015 at 88, she would have been so discouraged to have seen what happened with Roe versus Wade and the Dobbs decision. And we are facing an up and down situation right now in the state. It's legal again. It's under court test, but it's become ever clearer that we should not have religion in government. The government should not take sides in religious debates. It should not try to encourage people to have a particular religion or not to have a religion. It seems so simple to us, but it is a very controversial view. And when we started FFRF, Jerry Falwell was in ascendancy, and now we have other generations coming forward, and we have a real backlash by Christian nationalists today. It's a very clear and present danger to our secular democracy. So our work, we consider, has never been more important.
And so you mentioned your work, and you have been very active in other states, not just in Wisconsin, but other states, including the state of Oklahoma, of course. And I want to hit on three different things you guys have done within the state and kind of go one by one. The first, of course, is the first is your organization's work in getting a Tulsa Public School to remove Christian displays from several of their classrooms. One classroom allegedly featured the Bible verse John 3:16, which states, "For God so loved the world, he gave his only son," of course. Another classroom had a sign saying "He is so good," which your organization said is reference to Daniel 3:18. And that Tulsa district actually did eventually take those displays down. And so why does the FFRF, your organization, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, feel it's necessary to go to different states? I know you kind of hit on it already, but why does your organization feel like it's okay or feel like it's necessary to go to different states and make sure public schools don't have displays such as those?
Well, we today have members in every state, and we have 40,000 plus members, current members around the country. We have members in every state. And we actually don't have to go out searching for state church violations. They come find us because we act as a national clearinghouse to enforce the separation of state and church. And we get literally thousands of requests from members of the public, including people in Tulsa and Oklahoma, when they encounter violations like this in their public schools or government promoting religion in violation of the First Amendment. They ask us for help. And if, depending on what the legal situation is, we either explain why we can't help or we write a complaint letter. And we kind of consider violations in our public schools involving an impressionable captive audience of students to be a top priority. And the law is still very strong. We have more than 75 years of precedent against religious instruction, proselytizing rituals in our public schools. So we are there to enforce the law. So again, people come to us and we do not charge them money. We are a nonprofit and we don't even look to see if they are a member before we take action. We do this as a public service because we have a motto, protect the First Amendment, because it protects you. The First Amendment unites all Americans. By keeping religion out of government, the rest of us can be free to have any religion we like or none at all. Thomas Jefferson said, "It doesn't do me any harm if my neighbor believes in one God or 20 gods or no God. It doesn't pick my pocket," is how he put it. But when religion or a public school that's open to everybody, that's supported by everybody, by taxpayers, puts up a poster trying to convert kids to become Christians or emphasizing Christianity, that's totally improper. That's a real violation of the rights of conscience of students. And sometimes we see these violations in very low grades, including, kindergarten or 4-year kindergarten, which is really taking advantage of other people's children. Teaching religion should be up to the home, up to the parents. It isn't the job of the school. And if they were to teach religion, then whose religion? It's always going to leave somebody out. It's always going to leave the atheists and agnostics out. And today we are seeing that 28% of the population, 28 to 29%, today have no religious affiliation. And that's a lot of people. And that's why our group has grown a lot. There are so many more people today who are not religious. And we are good Americans too. So, so we are really trying to do this as a public service.
You might have heard, I'm assuming you have heard this before, those displays said something to the effect of, God so loved the world, what have you, and he's so good, he loves you, what have you, God, referring to that. And so I know I've heard, in my personal life as well, people saying these are signs or these are phrases that are supposed to tell kids they are loved. And like kids, they are loved, and so they are not hurting anybody, even if let's say, atheists or agnostics don't believe in that, why is seeing something that says God so loved the world or God loves you is, let's say, a bad thing for public schools, bad, maybe hurts kids, in your view? Why is that the case?
Well, it hurts students' rights of conscience. It hurts parents' rights of conscience. It hurts our First Amendment. First of all, from a legal point of view, because they're talking about a specific God of the Bible and a Christian God. And they're saying that this Christianity says that you have to believe in this God to be saved. That's the point of this. It's also a very guilt-tripping message that many of us would differ with. It's clearly sectarian. It's telling you which God you're supposed to believe in. It isn't caring to do that. If someone thinks it's caring, that's great. They can teach that to their own children. They can send their children to a private Sunday school. But they can't use tax dollars and the machinery of the state to indoctrinate children in religion. They wouldn't want their own children indoctrinated in a religion they don't believe in. They wouldn't want to see a poster saying, uh, Allah is the one true God and Muhammad is his prophet. So it should be very obvious why we can't take sides in religion or have children proselytized in our public schools. And I would also, as I pointed out, as an atheist, I find that to be a very offensive idea. I think it involves romanticization or some inappropriate desensitization to the idea of child sacrifice. I mean, that's what the Christian religion teaches. And so I would very much be offended.
Referring back to Jesus being,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
just making sure I
I
understand
also
it.
don't think that I think that human beings are very imperfect, but I do not believe in original sin. You have to sell people on something. If you want to, in order to get somebody to buy a religion, you have to sell them on something. And this is selling the idea of original sin, which I think is offensive. So I certainly would be mightily offended if my child had been subjected to that in a public school. Now, if I wanted to introduce my child to Christianity, then I would do that myself as a parent. And I would take that child to Sunday school and otherwise instruct them. And what's so great about the United States is that there's no country that has greater religious liberty for people to do that. And many people came over to our country to escape the tyranny of the state, the king, the church, telling you, you have to support the one true church. We're going to tithe you. We're going to take your taxes and make you support a church against your will. We're going to throw you in jail if you support the wrong religion, which actually happened, not just in the old country, but even in the colony of Virginia, where I understand you're from. And this was something that James Madison and Thomas Jefferson were so ardently opposed to. And James Madison was the primary architect of our secular, godless Constitution and Bill of Rights. They had firsthand experience. In Virginia, you could be thrown in jail. You could, if you were a man, you could lose your citizenship, custody rights if you were a minister of something other than the Anglican religion. A lot of people have forgotten this history. There was religious divisiveness in all but one of the original 13 colonies. And the framers of our Constitution were very aware of that recent history. And that's why they wanted to write religion out of the Constitution. And it has been a very successful, the longest lived Constitution in the world because it has avoided that divisiveness of religion and government.
Yeah, in that First Amendment, you mentioned a lot of that, past persecution before, let's say, our secular government took hold in the Constitution. That was, from my understanding, the main inspiration for Thomas Jefferson writing the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, which became, modeled for the First Amendment, especially our freedom of religion.
And it's a model for many state constitutions. I'm pretty sure also Oklahoma, that in the 1800s later adopted a lot of the language from the Virginia statute, which is the primary part of it is that nobody should be compelled to attend, erect, or support a place of worship or a ministry or a religious seminary or institution. And Thomas Jefferson felt that that was sinful. He said it was sinful and tyrannical to force somebody to support something in which they disbelieve. And I think most of us do feel that way. We don't want to have to support someone else's religion. I would not be asking taxpayers to support atheism. These should be done privately.
Now I want to switch towards a lawsuit that the FFRF is currently a part of, referring to, of course, the Catholic charter school here in Oklahoma. Of course, let's say Kevin Stitt and especially Ryan Walters wants to use taxpayer funds in order to fund this Catholic charter school, the private Catholic charter school. Why does the FFRF believe why do you think that is unconstitutional? Let's go that right. Why do you think, I know we already went over the First Amendment, but legal wise, especially maybe referencing the Oklahoma Constitution, why does public funds going to this private Catholic school is unconstitutional and should not be allowed?
I would consider this improper experiment there in Oklahoma to be the greatest threat to the separation of church and state and to our public secular education system that our nation has ever seen. It's that bad. It's unprecedented. It's a Catholic, entirely sectarian virtual school set up to promote Catholicism specifically as what, it teaches, but it's all under the framework of the Catholic beliefs. And they have openly said they will only follow the rules that they want to school rules that they want to follow. In other words, they'll disregard laws. These include that they could refuse entry to an LGBTQ student, or they could, if they have a family, family members, so the parents are LGBTQ, they say that they would, if they wanted to, they could expel a pregnant student. They could refuse to hire, or they could fire a unwed, quote unquote, mother, or someone who's pregnant who's not married. It's the whole gamut of what the Catholic Church stands for, that they would enforce with tax dollars. They would indoctrinate students in Catholicism as if they were going to a parochial school, and it would be entirely funded by taxpayers of every religion and no religion. And the number of Catholics I looked it up and I'm going to forget, but I think the number of Catholics in Oklahoma is something like 4%. There are more, the group that's the largest by religious identification today is actually the nuns, as we're called, who have no religious affiliation. There are more of us than there are Catholics. But in the state of Oklahoma, it's a minority, very minority religion, and yet all taxpayers, Protestants, Mormons, Jews, atheists, whatever they are, would be supporting this instruction. And the reason that they came up with this idea from the Notre Dame Law Clinic, the Catholic law school there, working with people like Leo Leonard, from the Federalist Society, who's Catholic, also working with some evangelical legal outfits like the Alliance Defending Freedom, who don't believe in the separation of church and state. And the Catholic Church would be the huge beneficiary if this was allowed, because they plan to plant, quote unquote, virtual schools in every state. And the reason they want to do that is because one of the roadblocks to having vouchers, we already have way too much support going for religious schools, is that many state constitutions have language that that school districts have to be treated equitably and students have to be treated equitably. And in many states, in most states, in rural areas, there is no private school. So it's been hurting their ability to keep the voucher movement going. And so then this would solve that problem by creating a virtual school, a virtual Catholic school. And then I think they would soon move to brick and mortar. They want, and they have always wanted, full funding by taxpayers of their Catholic, religiously segregated school system. Catholic bishops started demanding that in the United States in the 1880s, and they have been campaigning for it ever since. And now they've got, they think they've got a chance to sort of wreck our our public school system open to all, free of sectarianism, and force the rest of us um, to to support their religious ideology. And I would point out many of us are very angry at the Catholic Church right now, given the abortion bans around the country, and given the that almost half the states are banning or severely restricting abortion. Almost half of them are going after LGBTQ children. And this is something that the Catholic Church is very much in favor of. We don't want to have to support their religious ideology, and we don't want children to be indoctrinated at taxpayer expense. So it's a huge threat.
Regarding the lawsuit, there was a recent Supreme Court case. Sure you heard of it, Carson v. Macon. It was a 6-3 decision, which allowed the Supreme Court said governments choose when governments choose to subsidize private schools, they must allow such funds to pay for religious schools. Now that was a 6-3 decision. That was a 2021 decision. So we have the Supreme Court now, of course, after Donald Trump, which skews more to the right. For those listening, I'm not saying that's that's a good thing, what have you. It's just the fact. We have more conservative religious justices than we do on the other side. Do you think that is that a worry for you, bringing these sorts of lawsuits, not just this lawsuit, but maybe future lawsuits, that this Supreme Court is going to err more on the side of religion than, let's say, in your view, probably the First Amendment?
Yeah, I mean, I think objectively we can all say that the current Supreme Court is privileging religion, and even in some of their recent decisions to take cases where people clearly do not have standing, such as Joe Kennedy in the Bremerton case out of Washington that involved the praying coach, where he didn't even live in Washington state anymore. We get thrown out on standing all the time in our state church cases. We know the standing laws, and they're not treating plaintiffs equally or equitably. They're taking cases like the woman who didn't even have a business, claiming that she couldn't start it because she wanted to do websites for marriages, but then she would get in trouble if she didn't want to do a gay marriage. And she didn't even have a business. That's the kind of thing that's not ripe. I mean, that's just basic standing law, but they are taking these cases and even deciding in favor of these people. Now, Carson versus Macon involved Maine, a unusual case in Maine where they don't have high schools in most of the very rural state. So they had this unusual situation where you could apply for funding to go to private schools, and those private schools had been kind of proliferating because there was a need there. So it was a very, very unusual situation, and not tantamount to what's going on in Oklahoma. Oklahoma isn't supporting virtual private schools. This isn't like, oh, you're doing this for one, so you have to do it for us. This is unprecedented. And of course, I should say that even though it's a Catholic school in a very Protestant area, that the evangelical Christian nationalist movement is very much against a lot of our public education. They're continually saying that it's not proper, that they're trying to ban books. They're always complaining about public schools. They would also be waiting in the wings to take advantage if the Supreme Court says, yes, you can do this. They would start opening up their own evangelical schools. So it's not just Catholic in this case. It doesn't matter what the religion is, it's wrong.
I'm sure you know of our state superintendent here, Ryan Walters. I don't think, yeah, of course. In response to some of the actions that the FFRF took, Walters issued a statement calling your organization a radical atheist group, and further said, we have to take a stand for our students' freedom of religion, their freedom to express their religious beliefs, no matter what those religious beliefs may be. And lastly, he said the state of Oklahoma would never back down to your organization's bullying tactics. And let me scroll back up real quick. I know you did release a full letter, your organization released a full letter in response to this, but I want to give you now, for those listening to this podcast, a more vocal opportunity to express your views over those words and to just get people to understand why you think his assessment of the situation is wrong.
Well, we have suggested that Superintendent Walters should resign, and we have suggested that several times because he's using his office, which is supposed to promote public schools, as a podium to deride them and to deride the separation of state and church. And when, after that open letter, he issued some kind of very vague guidelines about religion in the public schools, which were nothing new and nothing that, for the most part, we would disagree with. I mean, it was kind of a lot of hot air. But where he has really gone wrong, he supported the virtual school, the Catholic virtual school. He has supported removing hundreds of books from Oklahoma libraries and said instead kids should be reading the Bible. Most of these books were books that were about, many of the books were about LGBTQ or about racial history. He's gone after the Tulsa School District when they did the right thing, when we wrote them about these inappropriate posters proselytizing small children. He threatened to hurt their accreditation, which is totally unprofessional. He's just using his position as basically a Christian nationalist mouthpiece. And our schools are needing guidance and support, and not someone who doesn't even believe in public education to have this position.
And to your point, I think also when he was campaigning for this position, for this elected position, he also said that public schools should teach a Christian lifestyle as well. And so
Yes.
to your point with that as well.
Yes. I mean, he acts as if he's in a Christian nation and that our schools exist to promote Christianity. And this is totally un-American and contrary to why the founders of our Constitution created the United States of America. They wanted a country where you could be free to believe or disbelieve. And this is not a Christian nation. And this is a huge, it's the big lie of the Christian nationalist movement. And this movement has grown by leaps and bounds. And everybody should be concerned, including Christians. And many of them are concerned. There's groups like Christians Against Christian Nationalism. There have been a number of books written by Christian authors warning about the dangers of Christian nationalism. Robert P. Jones, who's head of the public PRRI, the Research Institute, has a new book out on the hidden roots of white supremacy. And those hidden roots are white churches, white Christian churches. He talks a lot about it because he came out of the Southern Baptists. But he's a believer, a Christian believer who is very frightened about many of these inroads that are being made by Christian nationalists. In order for our people to be free and for our country to be free, we have to keep religion in its place, private. It should not be part of our government, and the government should not be promulgating anybody's personal religious views. And that is what Representative Walters has used his office to do, to promote and push all of his Christian nationalist views on children and taxpayers.
I'm sure you might have heard him say this, but one of his many sayings is that we won't let what was it? He called atheism a religion. How we won't let the Supreme Court or the state Supreme Court let atheism be the sanctioned religion. Do you believe atheism is a religion? I'm assuming not. And why do you think he keeps saying that? And why do you think he's so persistent in trying to claim that atheism is a religion in your view?
Well, if he thought atheism was a religion, then I would think he'd want to join it since he's so religious. No, atheism, if you look at the root of the word, a in front of a word means without. It means you're without theism. It is not a religion, but it is a perspective on religion. But that's the most you could say. And there's very loose definitions of religion, like people will say my religion is music, or my religion is the theater, or my religion is chocolate. That's about as close as one could say atheism is a religion. it is not a religion, but it is also it should be a respected viewpoint on religion, and it is protected under the First Amendment. So, he's simply he misunderstands or misuses his authority to promote Christianity in his public office. In his personal capacity, he can do whatever he likes. He can be a deacon, he can be a pastor, he can go on the street corner and preach, but he can't use the imprimatur of the state of Oklahoma to do that.
I want to switch more, if it's okay with you, a little bit more personal now. I'm assuming you're an atheist too?
I am.
At least you don't meet too many out and about atheists, let's say in this part of the world, at least this part of Oklahoma. And so can you tell me, maybe for the viewers, how did you get to that point of thinking of yourself as an atheist, as someone who that does not hold religious beliefs? How did you get to that point, if you don't mind sharing that?
Well, like increasing numbers of people, it was kind of rare when I was little. I'm a third generation freethinker on my mother's side of the family. So I wasn't indoctrinated in religion as a small child. My parents felt very strongly, my father had been indoctrinated in the Christian church. It felt very strongly that children should be raised free from religion, that they should be allowed, when they are old enough and have the intellectual capacity and the emotional capacity to understand religious claims, make up their decision about religion for themselves. And this is a supremely respectful view of childhood. We see so many neuroses, childhood neuroses, that come from religion, especially fundamentalist religions that are teaching children this is the end times, that if they do some minor quote unquote sin, they're going to end up in hell forever. And, just such a ghastly concept, such a frightening concept for small children. This is the respectful way to be a parent. And I was very lucky to be born into that household. And my husband was a evangelical preacher, primarily with a musical ministry. He's still getting some royalties from some Christian musicals. Dan Barker, and he's written a number of books about his journey from, preacher to atheist, and he's co-president with me of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And he had a loving family, but they taught him a lot of scary things as a small child. They thought they were doing the right thing, what they were supposed to do. But when he eventually left religion in his 30s, gradually his parents followed him out of religion. And as I said today, almost a third of the population has no religion. They're not all atheists, but about half of them are atheists or agnostics. And we are catching up with the demographics in Europe. But our courts and our public officials have not caught up with the changing demographics. And one of the problems, I think, is that we have this unwise and untrue motto added during the Red Scare in the 50s: "In God we trust." Well, who's that we? That's not me. And that seems to say that it seems to align patriotism and piety, or even citizenship, with belief in a God, which is exactly what our founders didn't want. Why we have no religious test for public office. And then, sticking the word "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance, that was, said for generations by school children without any reference to God. I think these bad violations from the 1950s have done a lot of harm of people's understanding that we are a secular government.
Our very last question before I let you go, because I know you have a busy day ahead of you. I know a lot of people personally as well that whenever they see the term atheist used to describe either organization or individual, especially if it comes from a politician describing himself or herself as atheist, even though they're few or far in between now. I think that is increasing. Like you said, they get nervous whenever they hear that. What would you say to them to maybe calm those fears, that say, hey, atheists are not these devil worshippers that you might have heard from your youth or what have you? What would you say to them?
I think they should listen to my husband's song, "Atheists Are People Too." Yeah, he has a song. You can find it on Apple and so on. But yeah, these are just myths, and I think some of these myths come from never having knowingly met an atheist. But I would challenge viewers, I think you will have met an atheist even if you don't know it, because atheists are fearful, especially in rural areas in the Bible Belt. But we had members in rural Georgia that met at an event in Alabama, and they were neighbors. And for years, they didn't know each other, were members of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and they were afraid to say anything. They didn't want to be stigmatized. It's to going to another meeting to realize, hey, there's a lot of us, and maybe people should be less fearful about speaking up and identifying themselves, because atheists are nice people. We pay taxes. We're very rarely, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn that off. We're very rarely the people in, I'm sorry. We're very rarely people in prisons. We're highly, our members are very highly educated. They tend to volunteer. They care about leaving our planet and our descendants a secure future. They're not worried about an unknown afterlife. They're worried about this world. We care in many ways more about this world because we know this is our only life, and that makes it more precious. So I think we just need to have more people feeling that they can come out of the closet a little bit more, and I think that would go a long way. That's what worked for the gay rights movement.
Annie, I really appreciate you joining me and taking the time out of your busy day to come talk with me about your organization and just everything that we talked about today.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
I hope you all enjoyed the conversation that took place on this episode of For the Record. I will see you all back here in about 2 weeks' time. At the Digital News Desk, I'm Justin Allen Rose, and this has been For the Record.